Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Beach Street Yacht Club, where we have we've come home to San Francisco and the Marina District here in San Francisco for our Tuesdays with TFE show. As you know, we have been we've been down in Newport Beach, California at Balboa Yacht Club for the last couple weeks with first the Governor's Cup, then the very successful, both. The Governor's Cup was a huge success, as was World Sailing's Youth Match Racing World Championship, which we also hosted at Balboa Yacht Club last week. It wrapped up Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about that down the road. But the first thing we really want to talk about is the big news in Cowes, actually in Plymouth, England, but the race, of course, starts in Cowes on the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England at the venerable Royal Yacht Squadron. The Rolex Fastnet race got underway Sunday, and this morning at 0:55 British time, the first boat finished, and here's a little video to get it going.
Concise 10 crossed the finish line in Plymouth to take the multi-hull line honours victory in the 2017 Rolex Fastnet race. The elapsed time of 42 hours and 55 minutes was well outside of the race record. However, the multi-hull performed impressively, leading from the start and finishing some 200 nautical miles ahead of the nearest competitor. After leaving Cowes, the race record fleet faced a mix of brisk to light winds as they made their way along the south coast to Land's End before the open passage across the Celtic Sea. The battle for monohull line honours has been contested by the three biggest yachts in the fleet: 115-foot Nakata, the high-tech CQS, and George David's Rambler, with the American yacht currently coming out on top. Further back in the fleet, the smaller yachts have been endeavouring to stake their claim for the Fastnet Challenge Trophy, awarded to the overall winner on IRC Handicap. But at dawn this morning, that overall lead was held by the biggest yacht in the fleet, Nakata. As she approached the Fastnet Rock, the iconic landmark shone favourably down upon her. Sailing alongside and with a slender advantage, Australian yacht CQS, as both tried to rein in Rambler 88, who has opened up an almost unassailable 40-mile lead over her two rivals. The fastest monohulls are now heading for Plymouth, where Rambler 88 is expected to cross the finish line in the early hours of tomorrow morning. Join us again for more Rolex Fastnet race updates.
So that nice video, of course, courtesy of Rolex and the Royal Ocean Racing Club, who conduct this 3-mile race, from memory, 608 nautical mile race that starts in the Solent, off of Cowes, the Isle of Wight, the famous yachting center really for the UK and arguably Europe for hundreds of years. And they're racing out past Land's End, through the Celtic Sea, around Fastnet Rock off the south coast of Ireland, back to the Scilly Isles. You have to actually, I think the mark of the course is Bishop Rock, Scilly Isles, and then back past the Lizard and into Plymouth, England. The race began in 1925 after some gentlemen, amateur sailors, went to sail in the Bermuda race, the Newport to Bermuda race, and came back and said we ought to have a race of about the same length. Bermuda race is, I think, plus or minus, give or take, 630 nautical miles. And that biennial classic, along with this, are arguably the two most famous ocean races, with, of course, the Boxing Day Classic off Sydney, Australia, the Sydney to Hobart race. In the event, there's a little text here. I'll put my readers on. This is from this morning, from the media release, just a little bit more about the race. Of course, the Solent laid on classic conditions for the start on Sunday. It was a brilliant sunshine. It was, if you've seen any of the video, well, you just saw some of it. It was really fantastic racing as the record fleet, more than the 360 boats, 368 boats to be precise, 12 more than the record 2 years ago, confirming, they say, Rolex Fastnet Race's position as the world's largest offshore race. And I guess we can, there could be some of you who would take maybe issue with that, but it is a fantastic historic race, been going on since 1925, and we have some great photos. This is the boat, Concise 10, which finished this morning, first to finish, the trimaran. It's a Mod 70. This is David George from the New York Yacht Club, his Rambler 88, which it was leading. I'm not sure they're still leading among the monohulls. This is the start of IRC 3, I believe it is, one of the 40 class, but it's something like 63 boats starting there in the Solent. What a fabulous sight. Sorry the picture's not a little higher res, but that's what they gave me. And of course, a lot of the interest is in the Volvo 60s, 65s that are racing in prep. This is what they call leg 0. It's a preparation leg, a qualification leg, if you will, for the current 6 teams, and we expect 2 more teams will be ready to go in the Volvo when they start off Alicante in Spain in October. And Sailing Illustrated will be giving that race a great deal of coverage, because there is worldwide interest, along with the America's Cup. Probably the Volvo Ocean Race is the other of the, say, big 3, counting the Olympics, in our sport. mp4 has been trading the lead. We'll tell you a little bit more about the Volvo boats. CQS, this Australian boat that's a frankly pretty strange looking boat with these things. It's a very narrow boat, and to support the rig, the huge rig, are these little outriggers on the side that the side stays go to, the shrouds. And I think the real class of the race again is Concise 10, who yesterday rounded the Fastnet Rock in this nice photo by Kurt Arrigo, and then finished. That says they finished this morning at 05:55 British time off Plymouth, England, and their victorious crew. Very happy indeed, and full marks to them. And I don't have all of their names. It's astonishing to me how event organizers still don't publish the names of crews with boats. In the U.S., it's getting better. We tried at the Gulf Cup and the Youth Worlds, as my coordinating producer, Julia Vadekind, will testify, but they just, you have to look all over the place, and about the only thing you can find online is the name of the owner or skipper, in this case, Tony Lawson. Congrats to them on what was not a record-setting performance, as you heard in the video, because, anybody know why? You know why, Julia? They had to beat all the way. It was a beat. It was uphill all the way to the rock. So they did not come even close to beating the recent monohull record. So I just pulled this off the internet, off their results page on the Rolex website. The website itself is quite good, the Rolex Fastnet website. And look at how close the Volvo boats are. When I last looked, which was about an hour and a half ago, Turn the Tide was leading in distance to finish, and now they're in 5th. And Dongfang, which led out of the Solent past the Needles, Dongfang then fell back. Now they're leading 148.3, but only 0.2 of a mile. And of course, the computer and the tracking system is judging the actual DTF, in nautical mile, distance to finish. And look at how close it is: 148 to 147, 149, 148, and I don't know why. I guess because their VMG is lower, but you can just see the boats are all clustered right here within a couple miles of each other. Fantastic racing. Nice to see that the U.S. boat, Vestas 11th Hour, is doing well. Yesterday, I posted Dennis Connor's latest podcast. He's been doing, I think he's done a half a dozen now for his sponsor, the Specialty Produce Networks, and some friends in San Diego, the Harrington brothers. And Dennis, without much recognition, has been doing these. I've been posting them regularly on Sailing Illustrated each time, every couple, 3 weeks when he puts one up, because he's an iconic figure in our sport. He's Mr. America's Cup. I don't know how many campaigns I did with him, I have to think, but 2 or 3. And 4 or 5, I guess. But DC is doing a podcast. So once I posted this yesterday, the world's kind of figured out, because I've been posting them all along, but this podcast is, guess what, about the America's Cup. So the world's trying to figure it out, one, because they're all watching Sailing Illustrated now, thank you very much, the other media, to see what's the breaking news and the interesting news, because we are not just the normal cut and paste websites where we take press releases from events and we search out for you, our dear readers, the iconic news, the iconoclastic news maybe, the interesting stuff, particularly about cool people. So Dennis has been doing this podcast, and then it showed up on 2 or 3 of the other sites, and it also showed up on the front page of the sports section of this morning's New Zealand Herald, who wrote a long story about Dennis Conner's bold America's Cup predictions for Auckland 2021. Great story. Maybe I'll put it up. It's nothing that I'm not going to tell you now, but maybe I'll put it up on the website later today. Here is the first. I'm just going to play. It's a 25-minute long podcast, or technically it's a video podcast, which the kids today, the young people who are dominating social media, as you know, they call it a vlog, a vlog for video blog, a vlog. And I'll just play the first few minutes. You know, this is typical Dennis. This is not glib Andy Rose, and this is not network TV. But bless his heart, he's doing it, and full marks to Dennis and his podcast from a couple days ago.
Hey folks, this is your friend Dennis Conner again, coming to you courtesy of our Specialty Produce Podcast Network and our producer Roger Harrington on the job, my local co-star here in these events. And today's podcast is going to cover kind of a wrap-up of what's going on with the America's Cup in Bermuda and its future and what appears to be New Zealand. So we know now that the events in the books, we had some heroes and we've had some goats, and we've had some people that made a lot of money and some people that lost a lot of money. So in general, the event, let's talk about the event first. The event really financially was doomed from the beginning, because anybody that's a real student of the America's Cup will know you can't just have a 1-year, 2-month event and try to recapture the investment necessary to go from zero like they did in Bermuda with no real America's Cup.
I think Dennis is spot on just about every observation he makes. As I said, I won't play the whole thing, but I commend it to you. It's up on the front page of Sailing Illustrated, and you can click on it. They've even now added some pictures to it after Dennis recorded it. But here are what I think are the key points that at least you will find interesting. He said he hears, and we all do, but I'm not going to make this firm a prediction yet. I'll tell you in a minute what I know with certainty, or what I think is certain. He thinks there's going to be a foiling 60 to 70 foot monohull, some kind of a modern, light, fast, planing monohull, and a foiler. And he makes that bold prediction. He also boldly predicts, and I'm not sure I at all agree with this, he says no Ellison and no Coots for AC 36. And then he goes on to say, however, there's another billionaire coming in from the U.S., and he names Rich DeVos. Well, Richard DeVos, the grandfather DeVos, who started Amway Corporation in Ada, Michigan, outside Holland or Grand Rapids, Michigan, over on the west side. You know, you can tell somebody from the state, over on the west side of the state. And as many of you will know, especially people from the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes will know that the DeVos family have been very keen racing sailors for many years. They have an 86-footer WindQuest, and a number of other boats that they've been campaigning. The DeVos family owns Quantum Technology, Quantum Sails, and have been backing that boat that son Doug DeVos, I think he's the youngest of the DeVos sons. I'll have to think about that. But Doug DeVos on Quantum, sailing in the TP52, the Super Series in the Med, and winning it more often than not over the last, whatever it's been going on, 10 plus years, closer to 15, I guess. Rich DeVos was the chairman. I actually recruited him into the New York Yacht Club Syndicate in 1987. I was executive director of that New York Yacht Club Syndicate, and our first chairman stepped down, and Rich, another Michigan guy, came in and took over the chairmanship, which really means raising the money, and that he and a number of others of us did, flying around in one of his planes, and from yacht club to yacht club and event to event, raising what was then the unheard of budget of $16 million for the 87 America's Cup. They got plenty of dough, as Dennis says, loot, I think he said, plenty of loot. He tabs them as coming in to do a New York Yacht Club. He didn't say New York Yacht Club, so I won't put those words in his mouth, but an American team, a challenge, and that he's the next American billionaire, the great billionaire hope for an American team in the next Cup. I hear the same thing, that the DeVosses are kicking the tires. I know Doug is a very competitive guy. His older brother, Dick DeVos, whose picture shows up in this, is not Doug DeVos, but Dick is a former chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. His wife, Dick DeVos' wife's Betsy, as you probably know, you've heard that name, Betsy DeVos is Donald Trump's Secretary of Education, the controversial choice, but apparently doing well, not all of you will agree, but apparently doing the job. You haven't heard any more controversy since, I don't know, a couple months about her, have we?
Oh, there is.
There is?
Yeah.
Okay, my coordinating producer who's watching the news more closely than I. But in any event, that's the DeVos family. Very well off, keen racing sailors. And Grandpa Rich, who's still around, who was our chairman, I think is one of, if not the longest surviving heart transplant patients. 10 years, I can't remember now if it was Valencia 2007 or Valencia 2010. He brought his doctors down from London. He actually had the heart transplant in England, I believe, and celebrated the, I think, 10th anniversary of his heart transplant, and I kindly invited me along to the party and a few others that had been on the America 2 team in 87. So it would not surprise me at all. I hear the same, bar talk and doc talk that the DeVosses may be serious about this. I hope they are. It would be great. But I can also tell you there are at least 2 other American efforts that I've heard from that are serious. And of course, what's everyone waiting for? And by the way, I've heard from one foreign team that you haven't, I don't think you have heard about, but for sure we know who the challenger record is. It's the Italians. Patrizio Bertelli from Prada. Circolo della Vela Sicilia, the Sicilian Yacht Club. He's the challenger record. Everyone expects Artemis, the Swedish team, back. Everyone expects to see the British team back, Ben Ainsley and Co. and Land Rover apparently back as their title sponsor. After that, your guess is as good as mine. But I do believe the Kiwis will write a protocol for AC-36 for the 2021 Cup, and that's what they're in the process of doing now. But they will write a protocol that is team-friendly, that makes it easy, affordable, and makes it easy to be competitive at an affordable price for probably as many as 12 teams. Remember that the last time there was a big exodus of the Cup from the U.S., the biggest exodus in 1983 was when New York Yacht Club lost it. We went to Australia for the 87 Cup and we had fully 17 teams of the high water mark. 13 challengers, 4 defenders racing off the west coast there off of Fremantle, Western Australia, just outside of Perth. The Kiwis, I can tell you, because I spent some time on the phone and in person with some senior serious members of Emirates Team New Zealand in the last 3 weeks. The Kiwis are in the process, as one does, as any defender does, of rewriting the last protocol. And you start with the last protocol and you take some, a big red pen and start marking it up and having meetings, and they have to decide the main items, the date, which they seem to have decided, 2021. The venue, they seem to have decided that Auckland. Now, whether it's inside or outside, we don't know. The boat, the choice of class, and of course, the venue is their only sole decision. These other decisions are by mutual consent with the challenger of record. And we know that Patrizio Bertelli, the Italian team Prada, really wants a monohull. But we also know that a lot of the young sailors want a multi-hull, a foiling multi-hull. So therein lies the rub. I know they have 2 teams appointed, studying, doing a design study on a multi-hull, even keeping the same or similar, and another team doing a design study on a monohull. So, I've written or been involved in writing, I think, almost every protocol since '92 in one capacity. And I wrote the first protocol in 1992, and this is a damn difficult job. The Kiwis have promised that they'll have it done this September, and I said, guys, you should have promised November, and then if you under-promised and over-delivered, you'd look a lot better. But in any event, they will be a lot quicker than we were, than Golden Gate Yacht Club was last time. I was not involved in writing that protocol. It took way too long. It was grossly unfair to the other teams. And I think you can count on the Kiwis to do a good job pulling the protocol together, redlining it, rewriting it, getting the various groups on board, because they do have to agree, not only the boat, they have to agree the nationality rule. Dennis in his podcast says there was never a nationality rule. And to an extent, he's right, because what the 1980 to 2003 rule was that New York put in and then the other clubs kept until the Swiss got rid of it, was a domicile rule. It was a residency rule. And all you had to do was move to the country for a couple of years, get a gas bill, get a cell phone bill, rent an apartment. You were domiciled in that country and eligible to sail for clubs in that country. And that didn't work. All it did was make it expensive, because you could recruit people. Then you could always get them in, get them on your team. You could bring Aussies to the U.S. or Kiwis to Switzerland. It just cost a lot of money. So Ernesto Bertorelli, and I was representing Golden Gate, we got rid of the rule in '03, but unfortunately most people still today prefer some kind of a nationality rule. And I think you will see, my ear to the ground says that there will be some kind of an 80% rule, 75%. They want Glenn Ashby from Australia to be eligible, of course, again, for their team. But I think you'll see some kind of a rule like that, but it will be more an Olympic-style citizenship passport rule, and which, frankly, makes entirely good sense to me. The only decision for sure is Auckland, February 2021. They haven't made that they haven't run a press release out and said that, but by all accounts, that's what they're pointing toward. That's consistent with what they did when they won the Cup in San Diego in '95, so I think you can expect to see about that same time gap. The bigger question is whether they run it. Dennis seems to think they're going to run it inside off this port facility where it's shallow. Some people think it'll be down here off, you can't see it, in the bottom of the corner off Princess Wharf. Some people think it'll be out here where we raced the Louis Vuitton Pacific Cup, which was an event while everyone was waiting for the 2010 America's Cup litigation to finally be over with and then have that race. And that was quite a successful event in here, and you could see it from a lot of different places. Or will they go back outside in the Hauraki Gulf, which is out past Rangitoto, and through this cut and out into the kind of north, the bay north and east of Auckland. So we'll see. And they're working on that, and of course, what does that depend on? Kind of boat.
Yeah.
Okay, Auckland 2021, you can count on that. We'd like to congratulate or note, I guess, when they first took the Cup, this is at the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, when they first took it down there, they had it backwards. The Cup, front of the Cup was, I think we've noted before on one of these shows, has the first engraving for the first 1870 match, and actually the 1851 race, such as it was. Here, on this side of the bulbous part of the Cup, which means it pours to the right. Well, apparently traditional claret jugs, which this really is, a wine jug, they poured over the right shoulder of the person sitting at the table. So the Commonwealth community, the Brits, all think it should be pouring to the left. They didn't realize which side of the cup had the engraving on it. I pointed it out to one of the senior serious people at the squadron, and after it did its tour around the country, it's now back in the squadron and pointed, small point, no pun intended, pointed in the right direction. By the way, this is the old Louis Vuitton Cup, which was first awarded in 1983. And remember who won that? Australia, too. The old Louis Vuitton Cup. It was retired this year because, I'm not exactly sure why, in favor of a new Louis Vuitton Cup. So the Kiwis, having won the Challenger Selection Series here in San Francisco in 2013, have both Louis Vuitton cups.
Wow.
And you remember when the gentleman who was not such a gentleman that came in, the activist, you know, I'd call him an idiot and a thug, but that would be politically incorrect. And as you know, I am always politically correct. Now, the cup was axed. It was sitting here in the mezzanine at the Royal Yacht Squadron, and anybody could walk in and see it. And they were very lax. And this was about in 1997 or 8, I can't remember. And the gentleman came in with almost a battle axe, a hatchet, and hacked the thing. I've got pictures, but I don't even like to show them because it's just so, you know, it's like showing the pictures of a dead body or a mutilated body. The squadron, in the meantime, had built this facility, this little cabinet, and this whole thing at night comes down, and it goes up into the ceiling so you can't see the top of it. It's bulletproof, apparently. It's also, if somebody comes in, somebody can push a panic button and the whole thing closes up. So they've done a nice job protecting the cup from whatever untoward idiots might try to come see it. Speaking of cool yacht clubs, Balboa Yacht Club, we have hosted the last 3 weeks. First, the Governor's Cup 3 weeks ago, and then last week, the Youth Match Racing Worlds, that any of you who've been following us on Sailing Illustrated will have seen, because we were there covering it and doing for the first time a big television effort. The Gov Cup is the annual Youth Match Racing Invitational that goes back to 2 years after the Congressional Cup. Balboa said, Chet and Glebe Purcell, Balboa Yacht Club member, said we ought to have a similar thing for youth, and they started the Governor's Cup 51 years ago. This was the 51st annual this year, won for the first time in 37 years by Balboa Yacht Club's own crew. They always get a crew in it as the host club: Christoph Killian, Harrison Vandervoort, and Jack Martin, and they sailed very well. They did not sail in the Worlds because they have jobs. In fact, Harrison helped us in the television production. And then in this past week, this is a new event. This is only the 4th edition. World Sailing has its own now match racing, youth match racing world championship. And this was by far the biggest event and the most competitive event. 6 of the 12 teams that sailed Gov Cup also sailed in the Worlds. And it was won by the Gov Cup winner from 2015, the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia's Tara Blanc Ramos here, who was just as sharp as a tack and a great bow lady on that boat. Angus Williams, who was the middleman on the boat, and skipper Harry Price. This is Commodore Tom Moores of Balboa Yacht Club, and the New Zealand vice president. She came up from New Zealand to represent World Sailing. Jan Dawson, nice lady, competent lady, head of KPMG down in New Zealand. It takes a village to run these regattas, let alone 2 of them back to back. There's 150 volunteers. All of you have run regattas, I'm sure, been involved in running regattas, or most of you, at one time or another. This is Greg Newman, who is the bosun, has to keep the 12 boats, get them in the water, get them equalized, maintain them, check every night to be sure the kids aren't changing anything on the boats illegally. And it's a huge job. He had Tyler Wolk and a number of others. Susan Kenny doing the media, and that's a massive effort. And of course, we're all feeding into her, and then she's got to deal with the press. And for the Worlds, that was especially a huge job because there was media interest. There were 9 teams from 12 countries. So you've got interest from not just the U.S. and maybe Australia and New Zealand, where the Gov Cup sailors tend to come from because those are the strong countries. But we did something unique this year, and we did it because of the kids. And this is something that our Gov Cup guru, Andy Rose, and my good friend said, we've got to televise this, not just with iPhone cameras on Facebook Live. We've got to do a full-on production. So for the last almost year, led by Chris Bretschker, who's the head of the youth member, or was the head of the youth members at Balboa Yacht Club, and a number of other of us, his dad, Staff Commodore Peter Bretschker, myself, Andy Rose, and there was literally a team of a dozen of us, did 32 shows in 2 weeks, the 2 weeks of the event, plus practice and some other pop-up interviews. We started on Monday night, and my point is, we do it for the kids so that their family and friends back home can see it. We're not doing it so we can gas bag on. Well, there's probably some of that. But so that their friends and family can see it back home and see the kids participating in a world championship. And we've got the most amazing personal anecdotes. We've got letters, we've got emails. One of the kids told us Saturday night after the prize giving, my dad, apparently his mom and dad are long since split. My dad has never paid any attention to my sailing. He's never seen me race, and he doesn't support it. He thinks I should be playing footy, soccer, or doing something else. And he said, my dad's been watching the coverage. He's glued, and this is down in New Zealand where it's -5 hours to us. He's glued to the TV. And he said, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate it because my dad and now my grandmother finally know what I do and why I do it. So that lifted Andy Rose's hearts. He introduces all the teams on the first night of the event in kind of a roast, polite, nice roast. I did a morning show every morning, and which, by the way, the morning show is more popular than doing a post-race show. So those of you considering doing the same thing with your events, do the pre-race show, do the morning show. People want to know what's about to happen. They don't really give a flying frig about what's already happened because they can read that in the press release. And so the morning show was very popular. It's not hard to do. There's the iPhone camera. It's an iPhone 7, so you got a good camera on a tripod with a computer, and away you go. And a television screen to put the slides on, just like we do here. And then Chris Bretschker set up our International Broadcast Center. That's a little too august, but a broadcast center. Technically, in the Olympics or any major event, they have what they call an IBC, the International Broadcast Center, where the TV production happens and where all the other TV networks come in and plug in and have their announcers and do the thing. So Bretschker, and this is actually Harrison Van Voort who helped us with spotting because it's really a tough job. But we do this not from the pier in Long Beach, the end of the Belmont Pier, or not from the deck of the Royal Yacht Squadron. We do this out on the water on a boat. Andy and I sitting together here commentating, cover camera, bow camera, drone camera, and Chris as the director-producer switching the show and running the show. And we've learned a lot. We got way better, I think, by the end of the event. But what my 2 points are, we do it for the kids, and it's great, particularly for an international event where people are spread all around the world, and they'd like to see either live or they can wake up if they're in another time zone and watch, and zip through it and see their kids and yada, yada. The other thing is, the other point I want to make with this is that anybody can do it. Probably not well, and we've got a long way to go to do it really well. But I hope more clubs and classes will take this as an example. Go back and look at our stuff on the Balboa Yacht Club page. It's also on Sports Illustrated's Facebook page. Because today, especially with how facile, how capable young people are with social media and with cameras and TV and so on, I suspect most clubs have people who are capable of doing this, and if for no other reason than going out in the water and shooting it back on Facebook Live so they can watch it on the TV in the Yacht Club bar, which is, I think, what we'll... And now with the drone, and Andy and I are commentating out there so we can see the racing. We're not stuck in a box on shore watching monitors. And if you're not out on the water, it's what we saw in the America's Cup. It is really hard to commentate if you're not out on the water. Technically, it's difficult to do it, but it's way better. And then, of course, the icing on the cake was the drone. Chris Bretschker bought a drone. We never flew it into the water. You had one guy operating it and flying the drone, and then the other joystick was tilting and panning the camera, which then comes back by live connection from as far as a quarter mile away. We could go all the way to the weather mark with it. And then every 20 minutes or so you had to return it to the deck of the boat, and this is David George making his final drone retrieval, which we caught on the television production. And it's the boat's bouncing, he doesn't have anything to hang on to, he's got to grab the drone, and if for some reason it didn't all work out, those little propellers cut up. I think you should be wearing like falconer gloves,
yes.
Something. Anyway, it was a great success. We learned a lot. I hope other events will do it. We are going to be doing other events ourselves because I think it's just so good for the sport to do this live video. With that, we wrap that up and really wrap up this show. But I'll give you one last video that was very popular. Somebody sent, Peter Houston, thank you for the link, sent it to me late last week. I put it up on Sailing Illustrated. Everyone else copied it, all the other websites, and it has gone literally viral, and here's why. This is the Sopol match race in Poland, obviously on a breezy day, on these Bavaria 30, whatever they are. The umpire says penalize somebody. It gets worse, don't worry. Down comes the rig. Thank goodness we had none of that at either the Gulf Cup or the Youth Match Racing Worlds. The kids treated the boats very well. The bosuns maintained them well. And of course it's much lighter air in California. So the Sopot match race in Poland, that's where that's from. Thank you for joining us. We will be back again next Tuesday with Tuesdays with TFE. Find us on the website. You can make some comments about that video and everything else. And our readership just keeps going north, and we appreciate it very much. See you next week.